But I don't know. And I run into them more often, you know, just because, I run into more young people than old people. Like, what old person knows how to use a computer after all? Well, that's kind of funny I should say that because my 62-year-old father knows more about computers than I do, especially within certain bounds, But it's like for some reason it's a more acute annoyance when it's the first way, when it's somebody who doesn't like the new stuff. Just because, if you don't like old stuff, whatever, it's in the past, it's never going to come around again. It will never be the 60s again. It'll never be the 70s again, or the 80s, or the 90s, or the 2000s. It will never be any of those decades again. It's over. The ship has sailed. So, but the thing is, the future is coming. The new music is going to be coming. There's always going to be someone making something. And for someone who considers themselves in any way a person who appreciates music or movies or whatever kind of art, cannot say that they don't like something after a certain time, that is not an intellectually honest position to hold. So the next time an old person tells you, or worse, a young person, I knew a person who was born in the mid to late 90s sometime, and he's like, well, everything made after 1980 was crap, and it's like, dude, that was already like way before you were born. Like, what the hell? It's like you're not even reliving your own childhood like the old folks are. You're reliving your parents' childhood, or your grandparents' childhood by that point. It's like, holy shit. It's like, come on. Really? Is that... And I'm not saying that it's wrong, and I'm not saying that like all music from all eras is equivalent or as good as one another or even should be liked the same amount. I mean, it is perfectly natural for an old person to like music that was from their era more than they're going to like new music. But even if something they like happens with less frequency, every now and then you would think that something would still come up that they would like. I mean, even my 62-year-old father listens to mostly music from the 60s and 70s and 80s to a certain extent, but once in a while I'll hear something like Coldplay or some other relatively recent band coming out of his music device because he likes the occasional song that was produced by, gasp, people who are a lot younger than he is. I mean, it's not the majority of what he listens to. The majority of what he listens to is, like The Who and like old folk rock from the 60s, which is stuff I love too, But once in a while, a song will pop up in his playlist that, came out recently. So I'm just saying, hell. Music doesn't have a time limit on it or, it's a product of its time, but any really good music, I think, is also timeless. That's pretty much what it comes down to. I feel like I've been talking about this for a long time, but it's something that irritates me, and I just had to get it off my chest. And I'm pretty sure that there are at least some of you, perhaps many of you, that feel the same way. So, there you go, folks. There's your little spiel for the day. And it wasn't even political. And it's kind of interesting. As much as I like to rant about politics and current events and stuff, I consider myself much more than just a person who follows contemporary events. I'm not pretentious enough to call myself a connoisseur of pop culture, but that's kind of like the approach I take, I like seeing things in the wider perspective. Sure, I love seeing like, oh, who's up, who's down this week, but to me, the real juice comes in analyzing the long-term trends, in just seeing where we are and where we're going. I think that's interesting, which is why most of my political rants, when I do have them, focuses around bigger long-term issues of our culture and those that we face in the world. Like, I'm not one to go and rant about the latest scandal. Not saying that I don't follow those and I'm not interested, because I am. But it's just like something that's, well, that happened. It's like, what's the bigger implications of that? I mean, sometimes there are, like, I think the George Zimmerman trial had bigger implications than just what it was. And I probably said something about that at the time. If I didn't, I'm not going to say it now, because it's no longer on the top of my mind. It's no longer on the top of anyone's mind, really. That was, months ago now. But, these other things, I'm trying to think of another case. What was it? That chick from Florida who killed her little daughter, whatever her name was, that whole thing completely bored me. It's like, who cares? It's one person who did one terrible thing, and either, and it only affects those who are directly in her, connected to her in some way, So that's about it. I mean, the only possible implications you can gather from something like that is, gee, people are messed up, but like, hell, there's plenty of ways to do that, and there's, it's no need to sensationalize things like that so much. So that is a thing. But there is one scandal from the relatively recent past that I will comment on briefly, just because I think it's interesting, it's just funny. You guys remember Anthony Weiner, the congressman from New York, who, sent dick pics to a chick and all that stuff. And then he tried to run for mayor of New York, and he might still be running for mayor for all I know. I don't really, I don't live in New York. It's not really the first thing I'm going to check when I see what's in the news. And then he was at it again and all that stuff. It's like, I really don't care. Like, to me, how many girls a politician shows his dick to is completely irrelevant in terms of how the politician is. I care more about his platform and stuff like that. But the thing that made me not like Anthony Weiner anymore was the fact that he chose the handle Carlos Danger. Carlos Danger. That was his alter ego. Like, that to me says more about his character, that he would choose such a lame-ass name, than anything that he did with any of these girls. I mean, come on. It's like, ooh, I want to sound edgy and mysterious. Carlos Danger. I mean, that's so freaking lame. It's like, it just shows a total lack of creativity, and I don't want a guy who is that stale-minded to be in charge of anything. Like, he's basically lowered himself to like an embarrassing sitcom dad at that point. I mean, that's all he is. Once he is Carlos Danger. I mean, that sounds like something that like George from Seinfeld would have done. I mean, come on, really. So that is my commentary on that scandal, and that is literally all I care about. Because one thing I've noticed, and this is true with. Do you remember the General Petraeus scandal a few years ago, where he was apparently having an affair? Like, I don't think that, other than for the wife, who is obviously has a right to be upset, nobody else should care about that, and nobody else should have a problem with it, because we like to think of things as, with a man and a woman are together, and they're monogamous, and that's the way that things work. But that's not really the way that things work. In our, mammalian minds and biology, just look at packs of lions or any other social mammal. There is the alpha male. You'd think that every male lion would have one female lion. That's harmonious, it makes sense, but no, that's not how it works. There is the pack leader. The troop leader, or whatever it might be, has all the women. His assistants might have a woman or two, but the top dog is swimming in bitches. If it's a dog pack, he's literally swimming in bitches. And if they're in a pool, it's even more literally swimming. But you get the point. And the poor schmucks at the bottom, they get no bitches. That's how it works. Now, these guys who are politicians and generals and all that, they are pack leaders. They are alpha dogs. They are naturally going to be inclined to be with more than one woman. It's just our culture that sees it as wrong. It's just natural. So I think the fact that General Petraeus, cheated on his wife, should really bother nobody but his wife. When you think of the services that he's done for our country, and then you think that we're just going to throw him out just because he was, had an affair. For the services that he's done to our country, he should have been allowed to have a freaking harem. He should have been able to have his own Playboy mansion where he could be with any number of women he wanted at any time. That should have been his right. But I think future generations are going to look back on the silliness. Think about how Alan Turing was a genius who broke the Enigma code in World War II, and he ended up being pretty much driven to suicide and persecuted because he was gay. We look back on that now and say, well, that was silly. He did so much. He was such a brilliant man, such a genius, a visionary, and for just a little minor detail that, he was pretty much destroyed. That is what I think well-minded people of the future are going to say when they look at the Petraeus scandal. It's here was a man who was a great military leader of his time, really helped out America a lot, but just because he had an affair, they made him resign. It's priorities, man. It's these silly little things might be our undoing. It probably won't be, but might be. So, yeah, that's pretty much how that works. Oh man, so I'm very happy to be making this. I think I'll just close up this little gap and call it a day. There's not too much more that we have to do, honestly. We are plowing along here. And I know that gameplay-wise, this has not been all that interesting. I'll come out and admit that. It's interesting in the same way that listening to, the pitter-patter of rain on the windowsill is interesting. It's sort of something that's hypnotic. You're just watching the city grow, but you're not going to be seeing a thrill a minute watching me build up Valtimore. But that's okay. I started doing it, I'm going to finish doing it. And that's about all there is to it. But I don't know. I've had fun. I've had fun doing this. And there's still going to be a little bit more to go after I do finish. So hopefully you guys will stick around for that, as you've stuck around for all of this. And I really do appreciate it. I like chatting with you guys. I almost like to think of this as a conversation, even if I am monologuing and you are just sort of idly listening, and maybe not so idly listening, maybe you are responding to what I say. And like I say, I do love when you comment, and I read all your comments. I'm not one of these big feet YouTubers who doesn't care what the fans say or any of that stuff. I mean, for one thing, I get few enough comments that I can still read them all within like a couple minutes every day, you know? It's not like there's hundreds and hundreds of comments and I can't physically read them. No, it's easy to read them. And I do. I do read them. So if you write a comment right now, I will read it. I may not respond to them that often, but maybe that is something I should do more. Just because people like to see their comments and queries directly answered. Well, ladies and gentlemen, look at our beautiful city. We pretty much have it all filled in. We only have this area, which is a relatively small area. And you have to remember that this city is the same size as Trinity for Tom Hanks. You know, it's a large square. So basically, all that's left is to fill in this area and then, you know, tweak and fine tune it a little bit. And lo and behold, Valtimore will be complete. Or as complete as any city can be, because there are no victory conditions for SimCity. It's just how the game works, you know? And that's what's wonderful about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for watching this episode and all the previous episodes in this little session. And I hope to see you all again very soon. Goodbye, everybody.